Yo, what up? How you guys doing out there today? This is your boy Roto Beast. I'm here with my boy Jeremy. We're here to present you our NFL Tuesday Tailgate segment. If you're new to this channel, make sure you click the subscribe button below. This way you can watch all of our NFL, NBA, and MLB videos. And if you haven't came and checked out our website here at DFS you're absolutely missing out. We have all the tools to help you compete with the pros day in and day out, including a complete optimizer, tons of content, daily FanDuel, and DraftKings cash lineups. Hey, we're truly a one-stop shop for our DFS needs. So make sure to check out the site here at DFSCheatSheet.com. So, hey, what up, Jay? How you doing out there, bro?
I'm good, man. I'm good.
Hey, it was exciting. It was another exciting
Monday night game, though.
Yeah, well, the Monday night game was bad, but outside of that, it was a pretty exciting week 2. We definitely made some money. The money team's on the roll. Yeah, man. I mean, do you want to kind of update us on some of the news coming out of week 2 as we're heading into week 3?
Yeah, so we got a few things. So first of all, the two big pieces of news to talk about, and that's Roethlisberger is done for the year. Turns out he is going to have Tommy John surgery, is what I've read,
Okay.
from tearing the UCL, the ulnar collateral ligament in his elbow, or it's restrained, whatever it is. He's going to have surgery on it. Drew Brees, have you seen the video? Does it look to you on the video like he split his thumb, like he split it open there? It looks like he not only split it open, but he tore the ligament. Obviously, he's having surgery. He's out for 6 weeks. But did you see it?
I was was watching the game, but I didn't see that particular instance. And then all of a sudden I hear, oh, here comes Teddy Bridgewater. So I haven't got a clear like viewing of it, to be honest with you. Did he like hit a helmet throwing, or what happened?
No, Aaron Donald threw his hands up and his thumb hit Aaron Donald's hand.
Okay.
Square, thumb to palm.
I get what you're saying. Yeah, I mean, on the Big Ben news, but I think Big Ben's going to retire. I just just like in baseball, whenever pitchers have Tommy John surgery, they tend to be out, year and a half. And Roethlisberger was kind of contemplating it this year. Retiring. He decided to come back. So, hopefully, he comes back and plays a year or two more. But I don't know, man. I think it may be, the end of the road for Big Ben. We got to kind of just wait and see. Time will tell us with that one. So it's confirmed that he's out 6 weeks for sure.
Drew Brees, yes, he's having surgery. Let me hit 2 other pieces of news, and we'll circle back on my opinion of what's going to happen with Roethlisberger. So Sunday, Jalen Ramsey gets in a physical altercation with his coach. He has to be separated by players. Today he asked for a trade, wants his way out. Would not be mad if he ended up in Dallas. That's just a little personal note. I would gladly give up a first-round pick for Jalen Ramsey, just like the Amari Cooper deal. I think somebody should pony up a first-round pick for Ramsey. And then Minkah Fitzpatrick today was traded this evening to from Miami to Pittsburgh for the Pittsburgh Steelers' first-round pick next year. Ben Roethlisberger is not going to retire. So 2 things here. The first, Roethlisberger just signed an extension, and now you've traded away your first-round pick for a defensive player, and you can't draft a quarterback in the draft this year. They're clearly not going to be – they clearly have struggled through 2 games, and they're clearly in a rough seat as far as being a playoff team, and you're looking at probably at minimum a top 15 draft pick. And whatever quarterbacks may be out there in this draft, without your first-round pick, you're in a rough seat. So I think Roethlisberger does come back. I think he plays out the extension. I think that I don't see him retiring. I just don't. I think that you don't trade away your first-round pick if you don't have a firm understanding on what Roethlisberger's injury is and what it looks like. Representatives in Pittsburgh have said it's not a career ender. So we'll have to see, but my opinion is at this point in time, he doesn't retire. He rehabs, has a surgery, rehabs, and comes back maybe for the first quarter of next year's season. The last piece of news, I don't really want to take up time talking about this guy anymore, but Antonio Brown now has a second person accusing him of sexual assault. The report I read, 2 instances of sexual assault. On the 3rd occasion, he raped her. So I don't know how far New England is willing to go with this. No criminal charges have been filed against him as of yet, but it's more drama around Antonio Brown, and it's another instance where a woman is claiming sexual assault against him. It's just not. It doesn't look good for the NFL. It doesn't look good for Antonio Brown. And if you're the Patriots and you don't do business this way, it doesn't look good for the Patriots either.
Right. In the Patriots, I mean, of basically any team, they're one of the more stricter teams. They're not going to play that shit. So it's going to get interesting for sure. We'll definitely kind of let that play out and see how it goes. So, hey, man, let's jump into week 3. Let's talk some football if you're ready to go.
Absolutely. So on that note, we go into week 3 with 9 teams 2-0. You got New England, Buffalo, probably a little bit of a surprise in the Buffalo Bills. Kansas City, Baltimore, they'll square off this week. So a battle of 2 undefeated teams, 2-0 teams. Dallas, Green Bay, San Francisco, probably a surprise to a lot of people. It's a team that you and I talked about, thought would be much improved this year. Seattle and the Rams. Those are your 9 undefeated 2-0 teams. And let's get into this week, man. Let's break it down. There's a lot of fantasy relevance, obviously, with the news we just kind of went over. There's going to be some value out there for sure.
Yeah, just real quick, just because you kind of touched on it, I actually just put up a funny meme a couple minutes ago on our social media accounts, and it had 4 different pictures. It said something's not adding up so far about this season. The Bills are 2-0. The Packers have a pretty good defense. The Bears actually kicked the game-winning field goal, and Lamar Jackson can actually throw. It's pretty funny, though. Go check that out. You were talking about the Bills being 2-0, and it reminded me of that. But yeah, let's go.
Let's touch on something really quick, man. Some things we absolutely nailed. One of them is I said it's probably a week early for Aaron Rodgers, and I was a big buyer in their defense, and their defense does look pretty legit.
Yeah, for sure. And yeah, it's one thing I do want to throw out there. Hey, cash lines hit again. We ended up scoring 134 on FanDuel. Could have even been a lot better day. You had George Kittle didn't necessarily have the best day as far as fantasy wise, but he did have a good overall day. Breida got sharked for a couple touchdowns, but it was still overall cash in all entries on FanDuel. And yeah, man, let's go. So first game we're going to jump into, we're going to talk about the Oakland Raiders going into Minnesota to take the Vikings. So go ahead and get us started with the Oakland side of things.
Yeah, man. Look, Derek Carr again, right? So, I mean, 6,700 on FanDuel is his price. You take a look at him through 2 games. He's completed 45 of his attempts, 22 of 26 in week 1 against Denver for 259 yards. Not as efficient this week, 23 of 38 for 198. And Minnesota, look, I'm going to continue to kind of stay away from attacking offenses against this defense until we're pretty sure of who they are. I think some exposure to them, to the Raiders in this game is okay. You can talk about Josh Jacobs, but at this point he's questionable. That would put a Jalen Richard in the mix. And if Jalen Richard is going to get a start because Josh Jacobs can't go, Jalen Richard has not been a 3-down back. He's a pass-catching back. He's a 3rd-down running back. So you have to be a little suspicious of that. Tyrell Williams at this point is questionable with a hip. The Raiders are not a team at this point. We'll have to wait and see what happens on Wednesday. But the Raiders are a team that are surrounded by, we need to figure out what's going on when the injury report comes out Wednesday. Because if there's going to be guys out, I can't see telling you to target anybody from this team from any particular standpoint. Not because it would be contrarian, because it would be a value play. Minnesota has a legit defense. And clearly, Minnesota wants to run the football and play defense this year.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, on the Minnesota side of things, we'll start with Kirk Cousins. He's out there looking like what's Tampa Bay's quarterback's name? Oh, Jameis Winston. Turnover machine. So one thing that we did say about Kirk Cousins going into last week was week 1, he only threw the ball 10 times. He threw it 32 times last week. That's a lot. That's basically, his normal is going to be around 30 times he's going to throw. He's a guy who likes to sling the ball around. Threw 2 interceptions, lost 2 fumbles, 4 turnovers just on himself alone. One thing that I will kind of throw out there that is kind of concerning is, yes, I mean, he's running the ball a little bit. This is not something we necessarily have seen from Kirk Cousins in the past, but 2 games through the seasons, he already has 4 fumbles that he's lost. So that's really concerning right there. But hey, man, they get a matchup this week against the Raiders. We seen what I can't compare the Minnesota's offense to necessarily the Kansas City's offense to Patrick Mahomes. But I think this is a good spot that Kirk Cousins could definitely bounce back and kind of have a really, really good game. Get on track. Dalvin Cook, he's looking like the real deal. He broke a long run yesterday through 2 games, averaging right around 20 carries, 125 yards, 3 touchdowns already. Plus, they're using them a lot out of the pass game. So Dalvin Cook, he's looking really good. 8,300. The price tag has crept up a little bit, but if he's going to be that workhorse back, then we got to consider him. Thielen, Diggs, the 2 wide receivers, both still too cheap. Thielen, 8 targets, caught 5 of them for 75 yards. Diggs, on the other hand, he just, man, it was a combination of Cousins and then a combination of Diggs. I mean, he had 7 targets, only caught 1, which was a big play for 49 yards and a touchdown. He also lost a fumble as well. 7,600 though for both of these guys, and a really good matchup against the Raiders. I think that these guys could definitely have breakout games. Is what I'm really thinking. Kyle Rudolph, 4,800. I mean, the targets went up last game. He got 5 targets, caught 3 of them for 9 yards. I'm not really into Rudolph, though. It's really just the 2 receivers. When I'm thinking about, the wide receiver core, that's going to be catching balls. Outside of that, I mean, you can even possibly look at Minnesota's defense. We talked about they have a really good defense going against this Oakland Raiders team, who is a little bit banged up. But yeah, really for me, I mean, it's Cousins, it's the 2 wide receivers, and it's Dalvin Cook are really the main targets I'm looking at this week for Minnesota. Moving on, we'll go to this game. I think this should be a really, really good game. You got Baltimore 2-0 going into Kansas City, who's 2-0 as well. This should be a lot of fireworks in this game, and it's going to be a pretty fun game to talk about.
Yeah, and just really quick, the Raiders are pretty banged up defensively too. Their defensive unit is pretty banged up. A good showing on their opener on Monday night, and then they've lost some guys off that defense. So, yeah, man, look, Lamar Jackson, right? I mean, I'm probably one of the biggest doubters of Lamar Jackson. We'll see how this thing plays out. 2 monster games for the first 2 games of the season. 17 of 23, 24. Then he goes 24 of 37, 272. 7 passing touchdowns. Looks like he's the second coming of Patrick Mahomes all of a sudden. We'll see. I find it hard to believe that, through the first 2 weeks, you get Miami, you get Arizona. Miami's a mess. Arizona's definitely a team that's trying to rebuild around a new coach, rookie quarterback. They do have a couple of pieces. His completion percentage was not as good as it was, not quite as efficient, going 24-37 as compared to 17-20. I guess my point here is Chip Kelly, I'll reference that again. Chip Kelly created this 53.5-yard offense where you have to defend sideline to sideline, spread the field, space it out. I just don't know, man. People figured out the zone read, and they figured out a way to defend it. They're doing a really good job in play design around this guy right now. I talked about that last week, having guys cross his face, giving him single reads. They're drawing up concept plays. Big play touchdown to Andrews this week was a kind of a gimmicky play. They motion a slot receiver behind the running back. They fake the swing pass to him. They're playing it too deep. The corner jumps, the safety jumps. Andrews runs by him on the sideline. Those are good play designs. It's not really a systematic offense. So I'm going to wait and see. Look, in this matchup, though, this week against Kansas City, the defense that I said has failed to really stop anybody for a year and a half and hasn't added any pieces to it. I mean, the Raiders started off looking like they were going to slice right through their defense as well. And then Patrick Mahomes threw for 275 yards in the second quarter, and that kind of put the game away. So I think
second quarter.
I think you've got to consider Lamar Jackson at 8.5. This is going to be a popular game to stack. It's 2 teams that are 2-0. The Ravens defense will be, in my opinion, it'll be about the Ravens. It'll be about, does Lamar Jackson take care of the football? And can the Ravens defense do anything about the creativity of Andy Reid and the talent of Patrick Mahomes? So, look, Mahomes, Williams, McCoy, I mean, from a receiving standpoint, Sammy Watkins, they've talked about, you can, I'm sorry, that's Kansas City. I'm sorry. See what happens. You put me on you always put me on the visiting side, and I want to talk about the home team. So Marquise Brown, Willie Snead, those are two receivers you can take a look at. Marquise Brown obviously was the guy who was the big beneficiary in week 1 with the monster game, 147 receiving yards and 2 touchdowns. But look, he had 13 targets in week 2 and he had 8 receptions for 86 yards. The only thing that didn't make it a really big day was he didn't get in the end zone. So Marquise Brown is clearly the favorite target of Lamar Jackson. Everybody talked about Mark Andrews coming into this season, $6,800 on FanDuel. Andrews also a lot of targets through two games, 17 targets, 16 receptions, 2 100-yard games, and 2 touchdowns, a touchdown in each of his first 2 games. So those are the big options. Mark Ingram is my favorite guy, though. I just think at 7,100, he's the guy that gets lost. He's the guy that's the bang between the tackles guy. He's been very efficient, 27 carries, 154 yards. He has 2 rushing touchdowns already. He had 2 receptions in this last game out of the backfield. I think that this guy's the staple. And then obviously the other guys are about the explosive plays, and they're going to continue to drop explosive plays and be creative around Lamar Jackson. So I think the whole key here is, does Lamar Jackson protect the football and come up with big plays? And can the Baltimore defense stop this Kansas City offense? Look back to last year. Lamar Jackson, 13 of 24, 147 yards, threw 2 touchdowns, 14 rush attempts for 67 yards. The last time he played at Kansas City, which was last year, and he was just getting started in the NFL. He's a completely different player right now. So I think that this is going to be a very chalky play, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I mean, real quick before I do jump in the Kansas City side of things, on our tight end video last week, I told you guys play Mark Andrews. I liked him a lot going into the week, and he didn't disappoint, man. So if you're not checking out all of our videos, like, you're missing out, because we're giving you quality picks week in and week out. Yeah, so I mean, on the Kansas City side of things, I mean, you got Mahomes. I don't even have to say much about him. Best quarterback in the NFL right now as far as the way he's playing. I mean, I was watching the game and they're talking about, yeah, any other team on a 3rd and 15, they're just going to run the ball and just kind of get out of there and you know, go that route. But hey, Patrick Mahomes, it was like a 3rd and 18 or something. He throws a 40-yard touchdown bomb, 50-yard touchdown bomb. He's, you know, one of the only guys that's really doing that in the NFL. So Patrick Mahomes, touchdown machine. He's a guy that, I mean, I don't have to tell you to play him. If you can fit him in your lineup, you get him in your lineup. Interesting thing we got going on right now. Damian Williams, he's questionable with the knee. Rashawn McCoy is questionable with the ankle. That's a situation we definitely want to monitor. If one of those guys are out and the other guys are full go, then obviously they get a big time bump because of that. So that's something we got to kind of monitor during the week. You know, as far as the wide receivers, with Tyreek Hill out, Sammy Watkins, he didn't have the you know, obviously the best game, you know, but it was, you know, respectable. You know, he still got 13 targets. That's the biggest thing that really stood out to me. Only caught 6 of them for 49 yards. But the targets are there. That's what I'm looking at. He's looking like Mahomes' favorite receiver outside of Kels. So I really like Watkins. A couple guys who really emerged. We knew somebody was going to have to step up with Hill out. Demarcus Robinson, he was a guy that really stepped up and was a big play guy. 6 targets, 6 catches, 172 yards and a touchdown, 6,700. I think he's the guy that you can look at for GPPs. And then one more guy, too, I'll quickly throw out there, 6,300 coming in pretty cheap. We got this guy, McCole Hardman. He's just a deep, lower end GPP play that you can look at, kind of differentiate yourself. 6 targets, caught 4 of them for 61 yards and a touchdown. Obviously, for me, I'd rather pay 400 more and go with the guy, Demarcus Robinson, though, for the upside that he showed us last week. And then you got Travis Kelce, man. He's arguably, best tight end in the league right now. We talked about it, him. Kittle and Ertz are all on the different level compared to some of the other tight ends. He got 9 targets, caught 7 of them for 107 yards and a touchdown. Had a very respectable day. So I think that you got Mahomes, you got the receivers, you got Kelce. They're all in play. I want to monitor this running back situation throughout the week and see kind of how that's going to go, and just kind of go from there. But Kansas City, it's a team, explosive offense. Any week that they're playing, you got to definitely consider them. So it'll be a good test to see kind of how the Baltimore defense holds up against that Kansas City offense. Moving on, next game that we'll go to, we'll talk about the Atlanta Falcons going into Indianapolis to face the Colts. Yeah, man, let's kind of jump into this game.
So 624 yards and 5 touchdowns through 2 games. That's Matt Ryan, right? And this was the guy that I had, I think, as my number 2 or number 3 quarterback in my overall rankings this year. I just look, Lamar Jackson is a freak of nature, right? And what he's doing is it's phenomenal. But he's got 7 touchdowns, and he has in the last game 16 attempts rushing the football for 120 yards. You're not going to get that with Matt Ryan, but you are going to get passing touchdowns, and you are going to get a guy who can put up 300 to 400 yards week in and week out. So the only downside on Matt Ryan right now is he's not taking care of the football. 5 picks through his first 2 games. So we'll see if he can clean that up. Surprisingly, the Colts have been a pretty decent team, a little better than I think most people expected. But I think you start right there with Matt Ryan at a price of $7,800 for a guy who looks like his floor is probably 300 passing yards and a couple of touchdowns. It's a really good price on him. The running back situation, I kind of lean more towards using Ito Smith than I do Devontae Freeman, but both running backs clearly in play. Devontae Freeman, only 11 rush attempts against Philadelphia, only 8 the week before, so he's got 19 carries this season for 51 yards, for 41 yards. Ito Smith on the other side, though, you take a look at him, and he looks like the guy they're trying to get the ball to. Only 10 carries, but 10 carries for 63 yards, and he does have 3 receptions. A nice little screenplay that they got him involved in. I think he's going to be the third down running back. He's kind of going to be what Devontae Freeman was 3 years ago when he took the league by storm, and everybody just thought he was his third down running back. So, Freeman's there, and then obviously you talk about the receiving of Julio Jones and Calvin Ridley. Calvin Ridley looks like he's primed to have a monster year and be Matt Ryan's number 1 target. I think Julio Jones is obviously the best receiver in the NFL, but Calvin Ridley looks like he's going to be the deep threat, big play guy here. They took multiple shots with him, and at 6,500, if you're going to get 2 or 3 shots with Calvin Ridley, I'm going to bet on Calvin Ridley. The tight end position, Austin Hooper is not a guy that I was big on before the season started. He's not a guy that I'm going to be big on as the season goes on. I mean, yes, right now the targets are there, but I just don't see this holding up. I think there's better tight ends to look at. He does have 15 targets and 13 receptions through the first 2 games this season, over 100 yards receiving in those 2 games combined. No touchdowns yet, and that's why he's not a tight end that I want to look at. From the tight end position, you've got to get guys who score touchdowns and get red zone targets. And if you're in the red zone and you've got Julio Jones, Calvin Ridley, and even Mohamed Sanu, and by the way, you've got Devontae Freeman, I just think he's the 5th option when it comes to the red zone. It's going to be a hit or miss thing week in and week out. Maybe you get him on a lucky week where he catches, a touchdown on a third down play, a play action pass later in the season. But I just think week in and week out, Austin Hooper is not a guy I'm going to want to target. Yes, he can get you 10 fantasy points. He can get you a 2x figure. But the upside for me for tournaments, it's just not there. Not when you've got Calvin Ridley. And I think that when this season is said and done, I think Atlanta will have more touchdowns from outside the red zone than they will from within the red zone. They're going to put up a ton of touchdowns on big plays.
Yeah, for sure. Very explosive offense. So, on the Indianapolis side of things, it's pretty simple. There's 3 guys that I think you can look at. They're all GPP plays, obviously. The Colts are playing a little bit better than people expected when Andrew Luck retired. Brissett, that's the guy I'm going to start with. 6,800, strictly a deep GPP play that's going to be low owned. But, hey, man, he looked pretty good against the Tennessee defense, who absolutely shut down Cleveland, who people would say would be a much better offense than the Colts. So, Brissett, he has 5 touchdowns through two games. He's rushing the ball a little bit as well. I'm not crazy on Brissett. I got stuck with the Colts in this particular situation, but I definitely think that you can look at him as a deep GPP play. The 2 main, they got 2 offensive weapons. They got Marlon Mack. He's going to carry the ball 20 times every game. He's going to, get a couple of targets out of the backfield. He didn't have the best game last week, but he still got his 20 carries, which, we gotta like that. Got 3 targets as well. 7,000. He's a GPP play that you can look at. And then you got T.Y. Hilton going against this Atlanta defense. The past 2 games, he's got 6 of 9 targets, so 15 targets through 2 games, 3 touchdowns already. So he's a guy that that they're looking forward to kind of for the big plays downfield. He's always been known for that, and he's more kind of their red zone target as well. It's kind of how it's been through the first couple of weeks. When it comes to the tight ends, you got Eric Ebron, Jack Doyle. They're both healthy. They're splitting snaps somewhat for the most part. So, they're getting 2 or 3 targets apiece instead of one of them getting 6 or 7. So I'm not really interested in the tight end situation. I mean, it's legitimately, you can look at Brissett as a deep GPP play. Marlon Mack with his 20 carries a game, and T.Y. Hilton, to get a touchdown for you. And that's really where I'm at, man. I think it's pretty short, pretty simple for the Colts. Moving on. Yep, next game we're going to go with is going to be Detroit going into Philadelphia to face the Eagles. I'm hoping that Detroit can steal this game, and, that's what we want as Cowboys fans, right?
So the number is 75, and that's passing attempts so far for Matthew Stafford. I think that we all knew that going into the season. I know a lot of people were high on Kerryon Johnson, and I think that that's kind of piggybacked to some of the upside people saw with him when last season ended. Detroit's never been a running team since Barry Sanders left. I mean, they don't have running backs in Detroit. They just bang up between the tackles. The one thing they've looked for a long time is a big-time running back that could complement Matthew Stafford and take some of the pressure off of him. And 75 attempts through the first 2 games of the season as compared to Kerryon Johnson and only 28 carries through the first 2 games of the season. Only 12 carries against the Chargers for 41 yards. 16 carries against Arizona for 49 yards. He does have 5 targets so far. It's just not there. It's just not there. To me, if you're going to do anything with Detroit in this game, there's 3 guys you look at. I would stack the 3 of them together. Maybe 4 if you want to talk about Marvin Jones Jr. at 5,400 on FanDuel. He does have 10 targets for the first 2 games. But to me, Marvin Jones, outside of having a couple of big Sundays where he had a couple of 2-touchdown outings that were huge days, he hasn't been consistently the number one go-to guy. It's been Kenny Golladay. And Kenny Golladay is a very fair price for the amount of targets he's seen. 19 targets for 2 games. He has 12 receptions already, a touchdown in each game, 117 yards against the Chargers. Galladay's that guy. And then the third piece to me is the guy I've been talking about since the season started, before the season started, and that's TJ Hawkinson. I think this guy's an absolute beast. He comes out of the University of Iowa. The guy's a huge frame. He's a George Kittle, Rob Gronkowski type body, very athletic. His debut, he goes 9 targets, 6 receptions, 131 yards, and a touchdown. A bit of a dud against a better defense than the Chargers, but I do think that you can streamline a tight end play against the Eagles here. You start looking at week 1, and Vernon Davis had a monster day. We just talked about Hooper. He had 6 catches. So, Hawkinson, I think, has a pretty good day. Those are the 3 guys I would look at. I wouldn't go any further. I just don't think you need to. And I would run that as a 3-man stack.
Yeah, man. On the Eagles side, it's a little bit of a mess right now. You got Carson Wentz. He got hit in the ribs. He ended up coming back playing and ended up finishing the game. But let's face it, man. Carson Wentz, he hasn't been looking very good through the first couple of days. He had a good second half against the Giants, which kind of brought them back, and they ended up winning that game. But outside of that, I mean, he's been looking a little bit rough. It is what it is now. I mean, there's a lot of injuries to the receiving core. It's a wait-and-see approach. You got Alshon Jeffries with the calf injury. You got Deshaun Jackson with the groin injury. We got to kind of wait and see what's going to happen with those guys. I will say, it is a pretty good matchup. I'm going against Detroit for Carson Wentz. So if he's fine with the ribs and they don't flare up, and he's ready to 100% to play, then I think he could have a good day. If Jeffries and Jackson are out, I think there's 2 big beneficiaries. You're looking at Nelson Aguilar, who ended up getting 11 targets yesterday, caught 8 of them for 107 yards and a touchdown. He's probably the biggest beneficiary if both receivers are out. And then, you got to look at Ertz as well. I mean, Ertz, it was ridiculous what he got. He got 16 targets yesterday, caught 8 of them for 72 yards. I mean, Ertz and Wentz, I mean, they have their connection. They like each other a lot. So I mean, we got to wait and see what's up with the wide receivers. If both, like I said, both of the guys are out, Ertz, Aguilar, they get big time bumps. If the other guys are healthy, then you can look at an Alshon Jeffrey at 6,700. You can look at a Deshaun Jackson at 6,600 as GPP plays. It just we got to see what's going on with the wide receivers to figure out who's going to get a bump or what's going on with that situation, and then we can kind of make a little bit more of a decision later in the week. That's really where I'm at with Philadelphia, though. Moving on, next game we're going to talk about is going to be Denver going into Green Bay to face the Packers. Go ahead and get us started with the Denver side of things.
Denver's 0-2 and they need to win. And Green Bay looks like they've solidified a defense. I talked about their secondary and said that this secondary, when the season was over, was either going to be a bottom third secondary or what I thought they could end up being a top 10 secondary with all the young players they have in it. I'm a big believer that this defensive line is legit. I don't think you let a Clay Matthews leave like they did, basically, without knowing that you've got something coming up here on this defensive line. I think that this Packers defense is, and they've been legit through 2 games. So Denver needs a win. Joe Flacco, I talked about it last week. We'll talk about it again. He threw the ball 31 times against the Oakland Raiders, 21 of 31, 268 yards and a touchdown. He threw it 50 times against Chicago, 35 of 50, 292 yards, 1 passing touchdown, 1 interception. If Joe Flacco is going to throw the ball this many times at $6,400, you've got to take him. Clearly what that says to me is that and we saw it on national TV week 1 against the Raiders. They struggled to run the football. And once they got the passing game going, they got Emmanuel Sanders involved, they got Sutton involved, things started to kind of come together for them, and they made a push late in that game. If Joe Flacco is going to throw it this many times, it's kind of like Andrew Luck last year. Andrew Luck didn't have the most weapons around him. Everybody was kind of unsure about him. His price was down. Nobody really wanted to play him. And through the first 4 weeks, Andrew Luck had thrown the ball way more than anybody else was and was one of the top fantasy quarterbacks through 4 weeks. And he was super low owned in every single Sunday. So Flacco's another guy. Nobody's going to be off Flacco. If he's going to throw the ball 50 times, you have to give him consideration, no matter how good Denver's defense is. Outside of Joe Flacco, look, until they can run the football on a full slate like this, there's no reason to look at Phillip Lindsay or Royce Freeman. But you do want to get some exposure to these receivers: Emmanuel Sanders, Cortland Sutton, Deshaun Hamilton. And at the tight end position, I'm probably going to fade that. But it's really, for me, it's the 3 receivers and Joe Flacco is who I'm looking at.
Yeah, on the Packers side of things, Aaron Rodgers, bro. I'm going to give you a real fast story. Aaron Rodgers, he's not looking like the quarterback that he was a couple of years ago. But at the same time, on the flip side of things, he's faced 2 pretty good defenses in the Chicago Bears and the Minnesota Vikings. Aaron Rodgers, 2 years ago, fantasy-wise, I played Aaron Rodgers literally in daily fantasy sports for 14 straight weeks, and I won 14 straight weeks with Aaron Rodgers as my quarterback. I figured the rest out. I don't think he's necessarily that quarterback anymore, but he's going to have monster games. He is. And you mentioned, he's going against another tough defense this week, so I don't know if this is necessarily the week that we really want to play him, but he's $7,900. This is a really good price tag for Aaron Rodgers. So I think as a low GPP play, I think that you can give him a couple shares of consideration if you're max entering and kind of see if that's a week that he just absolutely goes off. When it comes to the running backs, last week Aaron Jones, he's obviously the lead back. He got 23 carries for 116 yards. 6 targets, caught 4 of them for 34 yards for 23 fantasy points. He had a good week. The only concerning thing is yes, he did get 23 carries, but Jamal Williams also got 9 carries for 28 yards, also had 4 targets, 3 catches for 13 yards and a touchdown. So even though it's not necessarily a split backfield timeshare, Jamal Williams is eating into Aaron Jones' production. That's one thing I do want to throw out there. Wide receiver-wise, I'm going to say it. Devontae Adams, he's been a red zone shark for the past couple of years. Aaron Rodgers has always looked for him in the red zone, and he's due for a touchdown. 2 straight games without a touchdown. Obviously, last game he had a much better game. 9 targets, caught 7 of them for 106 yards. He's due for a touchdown. I can see him getting in the end zone this week. $8,200, the price tag. It's a price tag for a wide receiver 1 with a good quarterback. I'll just leave it like that. I think he is a pretty good GPP player, though you can look at. Probably going to be very low owned as well. And then lastly, I'll quickly just bring him up. Jimmy Graham. We thought he was going to be a little bit more involved in what in this offense. Week 1 had 5 targets, caught 3 of them for 30 yards and a touchdown. Last week he only had 2 targets. Caught, he didn't have any catches. So I'm not really super high on Jimmy Graham, but the price tag at 4,900 is dirt cheap. So I think you can look at him for GPP consideration as well. So that's really where I'm at with Green Bay. I mean, it's not necessarily the sexiest matchup or anything like that this week, but I think they definitely will come in a little bit lower owned, and you can look at them for GPP consideration. Moving on, this game's probably going to be a little bit of a mess, man. You got the Jets, who just got demolished tonight by the Browns, going into New England to face a Patriots team that's absolutely rolling right now. I mean, I can see this game getting out of hand fairly quickly. Yeah, man, let's jump into this game.
Yeah, so on the New England side, what do you want? Hey, what do you want me to say here? Look, here's the real deal, right? Le'Veon Bell's going to get as much as he wants. He's going to get as much as he wants.
That's all you have to say. You play Le'Veon Bell because of his workload, and you move on.
Wait, I do think that there's some legitimate fantasy value here, though. But it's such a deep play for a big GPP, and you have to look at game flow and game theory and all these things. But I do think there is some value to be had on the Jet side, and I'm quickly going to talk about a couple of guys. Look, I really believe that Le'Veon Bell will get as much as he wants. I just think that, you look tonight, 10 targets, 10 receptions, 61 yards, very elusive out of the backfield, 21 rushes, 68 yards. Cleveland was a defense that we were on early before the season started. We thought it was one of the top defenses with like Buffalo, with some of these other top defenses. Cleveland played really well tonight. Look, all of that aside, Bill Belichick is going to do everything he can to take him out of the game. That's what Bill Belichick does. He takes your best player away from you, and then he kind of works his way down. So what I think can happen in this game is this game gets over pretty quick. Trevor Siemian, he's probably out with a lower leg injury. To me, it looked like he dislocated it. We know Sam Darnold's already out for multiple weeks with mono. So Luke Falk was a little bit impressive tonight, to be honest with you. A guy fresh off the street.
He got better as the game went on as well. That's one thing I want to mention.
I got a text from one of my buddies who literally said Le'Veon Bell's going to get as much as he wants tonight because the guy who just went in the game was washing cars last week, and that's pretty right on. But look, 20-25, 198 yards. We also mentioned Luke Falk when we talked about this Monday night single game slate and said we don't know what's going to happen with Trevor Siemian. It may be worth getting some exposure to him. He only had 7.92 points. It wasn't a factor, but it kind of played out that way. Unfortunately, Siemian left with an injury. Don't wish an injury upon anybody. But the guy I think from a fantasy standpoint is Robbie Anderson. I think that you can look at him I think that this is a guy he'll look to target. I think the targets can be there, maybe some catches. The game gets away. I think Robbie Anderson at a $5,700 price tag maybe gets a late touchdown. We know they're going to throw the ball. We know they're going to be from behind. We know they're going to try and take Le'Veon Bell away. And then the other guy that I would throw in here at 4,600 as maybe a flex play in tournaments or a running back too is Ty Montgomery, just because if they're getting their doors blown in the fourth quarter, even halfway through the third quarter, I really think you can see some Ty Montgomery in the backfield, get some targets. Tonight, you saw a little bit of that in the fourth quarter once the game was out. He did have 3 rush attempts for 25 yards. He did get 3 targets, 3 catches for 15 yards, all of that coming late, really, in the fourth quarter. So that's kind of the fantasy relevance for me in this game is there's a couple of really cheap, lower-owned guys, if you look at game flow, could have some opportunity once this game is over after the half.
Yeah, I honestly believe, and you're probably going to laugh, the best play on the Patriots side is their defense. That's how I honestly feel that way. I mean, you got Tom Brady. We talked about it. We feel this game's probably going to get over quickly. 7,800, I mean, it's a fair price tag for Tom Brady. Respectable through the first 2 weeks, even in games that got away. 25 fantasy points, 25 fantasy points. So I think that you can look at Tom Brady. He's not going to. I mean, I don't think he's going to be very high owned. He's in play, but when it comes to the receivers, that's where it starts to get ugly. I mean, he's spreading the ball around so much. Antonio Brown led the way, obviously, with 8 targets, caught 4 of them. Edelman had 4 targets. Josh Gordon had 5 targets. You had Philip Dorsey had 3 targets. Like, Tom Brady's spreading it around. He has so many weapons right now. I mean, you could take basically, their top 3 receivers and use them as GPP, but I don't think none of them are really cash game viable right now, just because it's getting the rock is getting spread around so much. One guy that we did mention that could possibly have a bounce back week, and I think we can go back to the well again this week. It's Sony Michel. He didn't have a crazy week, but he did get 21 carries for 85 yards, rushing touchdown, also had a fumble. But if the game's going to get over quickly, they're just going to hand the ball off over and over, kind of get their win, and get out of there. And I think that, just like we seen last week in Miami where he got 21 carries, I could definitely see this week him getting another 20 carries plus. If they get up big on the Jets, which I think is going to happen. And, Chubb had a pretty good day today. Beckham obviously had a really good day, especially capped off with that long touchdown. So I mean, I think that you can look at these New England guys. They're just strictly GPP because, the game is probably going to get over pretty quickly. And, hopefully they get there before the game gets over. And that's really where I'm at with New England.
I'll tell you the guy that I think is gonna be the guy for New England this week. You want me to tell you?
Sure.
Rex Burkhead.
Oh,
I think that this is a Rex Burkhead week, and I'm going to give you the reasons why. He has 13 rush attempts for 65 yards through 2 games. He has 10 targets, 7 catches for 88 yards through 2 games. I was huge on Sonny Michel last week because I called the LeGarrette Blount rule. If they're a double-digit favorite, I would always roll LeGarrette Blount because of the fact that we knew in the second half it was going to be shove the ball between the tackles with LeGarrette Blount and run the game out, shorten up the game. Sonny Michel fumbled in this game. Bill Belichick does not like that stuff. He does not like turnovers. He does not like running backs who make mistakes, and they have a stable of running backs. Michel, James White, Damian Harris has been inactive, but they do have Rex Burkhead, who has played in both these games. And anytime that you think you've got it figured out which running back the New England Patriots are going to feature in their offense, Bill Belichick switches it up. I just think that it feels like it should be a Sonny Michel week. People are going to kind of look at it like, hey, Michel had a good game. He had 21 carries. He had 86 yards. He got a touchdown. They're a big favorite. They're going to run the ball. And then Rex Burkhead is going to shark him for 2 or 3 touchdowns inside the red zone and shark every other person. And he's going to come out of nowhere at 4,600. I think Burkhead's a deep tournament play, but definitely somebody that I think is worth getting exposure to in a flex spot.
Yeah, you mentioned them. They got 3 really good running backs that they use. They use all of them. So it's kind of a flip of the coin of who's going to kind of get there that week for sure. Moving on, next we got Miami, the first NFL tanking team going into Dallas to face the Cowboys. This game has by far the highest spread. Dallas is favored by 21 in this one.
Yeah, it's kind of funny because they did mention that on ESPN tonight that this is starting. The NFL is starting to turn into the NBA. Guys not happy, asking for trades. Now you're starting to see teams that are tanking. I don't know if I want anything to do with Miami. I really don't. Miami, though, I mean, they'll probably be active trading more people away. They're collecting a ton of picks. They've got 3 picks coming up in the first round of the 2020 draft. That's about the best thing to talk about when it comes to Miami. I don't really want anything to do with the quarterback situation. If I was going to play anybody here, I would maybe link up Ryan Fitzpatrick with Devontae Parker. Devontae Parker at $4,800. He has big playability, but I'm really digging deep to try to get you something on the Miami side.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, I'm just going to keep it short and simple on the Cowboy side of things. I mean, Dak's looking really good. Zeke is back to his normal workload. I mean, you could consider both of those guys. Wide receiver-wise, Amari Cooper is looking more like the red zone target that they're looking at right now, 7,700. Gallup had another solid game. He is questionable with the knee. It's looking like he may miss some time. If he's out, I think that gives a bump to Amari Cooper and gives a bump to Randall Cobb. I think that both of those guys definitely get a bump with Gallup out. And then another guy that you can consider, it's a deep GPP play, but this guy Devin Smith, he came out. Only 3 targets, caught all 3 for 74 yards and a touchdown. Had a big play at 5,200. Because Randall Cobb is not a guy that's gonna line up outside the numbers. He's a guy that's gonna be in the slot. So if Devin Smith is gonna get some more snaps and be the guy opposite of Amari Cooper, I think he's a guy that you can look at as well. I'm gonna be low owned. Outside of that, Jason Witten. I'm not really into Jason Witten, but 2 weeks in a row, 4 targets. A touchdown each week. You know what I'm saying? That's really where I'm at with Jason Witten. And, it really is, it's the Dallas defense. I think this is the week that they have a really, really good day, defensive-wise going against Miami. We just seen what the Patriots defense did to Miami and got 40-something fantasy points. It's really the Cowboys defense is probably the best play in this game. What do you think?
I think that you do 2 things. You play the Cowboys defense and you stack them with Zeke. That's what you do. This is going to be a Zeke game. One thing that needs to be mentioned is Michael Gallup, 15 targets and 13 catches, over 200 yards receiving through 2 games. Will miss the next 2 to 4 weeks. He's going to have orthoscopic surgery on his knee to trim off some of his meniscus, and that's why Devin Smith. That's why Devin Smith was kind of a breakout type player in the game. I do look for them to be more creative with Randall Cobb. 3 targets, 74 yards for Smith, like you mentioned. But to me, you pair up Zeke and you pair him up with the Dallas defense and you move on.
Yeah, I agree. Next game we're going to go with, we got Cincinnati going into Buffalo to face the Bills.
Yeah, so look, we're talking about quarterbacks and we're talking about opportunity. And through 2 games, Andy Dalton has thrown the ball 93 times. He's thrown the ball 93 times. So 418 yards against Seattle, 311 against San Francisco. He's got 4 passing touchdowns and 1 pick. Anybody who's got this amount of volume, you have to consider him because of the upside. And you talked about the receivers. You liked both Ross and Boyd last week. You take a look at John Ross, another week, another very good receiving week, another 100-yard receiving week. 12 targets in week 1, 8 targets in week 2. He's got 11 catches, 2 100-yard games already this season, 3 receiving touchdowns, and Tyler Boyd, right? Tyler Boyd is a guy that everybody was on last year. 2 weeks of double-digit targets, 18 catches for 182 yards through 2 games. Has not scored a touchdown yet. The only problem with this matchup is that it is Buffalo's defense, and Buffalo's 2-0, and a lot of that has to do with their defense. This is a legit defense. We talked about them before the season started. It's a legit defense. So while I think that there's a couple of things you can consider here, I don't think Joe Mixon is in play. I don't want anything that has to do with a running back going against Buffalo's defense. He only has 17 carries through the first 2 games of the season for 27 yards. He was very ineffective against San Francisco. He was doubtful for part of the week, ended up practicing. We'll have to see if that ankle is okay when the injury report comes out, because he only had the 17 yards and 11 carries. So to me, it's really about Andy Dalton. It's about the 2 receivers. If you want to look at Tyler Eifert, I guess you could. He's only $4,900. But Andy Dalton's throwing the ball to the 2 wide receivers. That's who he's throwing the ball to. So, and sure. Again, Andy Dalton with that amount of volume is somebody that you have to take a look at. So that's kind of where I'm at with Cincinnati. If you want to take maybe a flyer here, Damian Williams, another guy, 8 targets through 2 games. That may be what this game turns into, is an Andy Dalton throwing fest where they're behind, and then they get a couple of cheap touchdowns in the fourth quarter, kind of like they did against San Francisco.
Yeah, on the Buffalo side of things, it's simple. There's a couple guys you look at. Josh Allen, mentioned him in our quarterback video, and he had a pretty good day, man. 19 for 30, 253 yards and a touchdown on the ground, 7 carries, 21 yards, rushing touchdown. $7,500 is a fair price tag for a guy who's going to run the ball, and it's going to, they're doing a lot with Josh Allen. I mean, they don't have too many weapons, so they have to be really creative, and he's basically their best player. So they're trying to. He reminds me a lot of Lamar Jackson, Josh Allen, as far as the way they're kind of using him. One thing I will mention, a guy that stands out to me, Devin Singletary, the running back, their young running back that they really like. He's questionable with a hamstring injury. It looks like he's probably going to miss the game. If that's the case, I'm going to go to old man Frank Gore. We talked about in week 1, and he didn't have a great game, and he really let us down. But last week, 19 carries, 68 yards, and a rushing touchdown. 2 targets, caught both of them for 15 yards and 15 fantasy points. At 5,700, if he's going to give us 12 to 14 fantasy points and have the workload because the other guy's out, I think we got to consider him. Obviously, he's a GPP play, but he's going to be a guy that's low owned. In the wide receiver core, I mean, you're looking at John Brown. He's the guy who is emerging as their number 1 receiver. 8 and 10 targets in the first 2 games, caught 7 of them in both games. He has a touchdown in the first game. The only other guy that you could consider, but this guy doesn't really give you too much upside, Cole Beasley. He's getting a bunch of targets as well. Last game, he only got 4 targets, caught all 4 of them for 83 yards. First game, though, he did have 9 targets, caught 5 of them. This Buffalo offense, it's not very exciting for me. I mean, it's really just, I like Josh Allen and I like Frank Gore if the guy Devin Singletary is out. And that's really where I'm at with Buffalo. It's really, really simple.
Yeah, man. Keep it pushing.
Moving on, next game we're going to go with is going to be the Carolina Panthers going into Arizona to face the Cardinals.
One guy, though, that I would mention that I talked about in the wide receiver video was Zay Jones for Buffalo. And just because of his upside and just because of the fact that they gave the Bengals gave up some really big plays to wide receivers for the 49ers last week, I just think that that's another good tournament play at $4,700 for a wide receiver number 3 that's definitely worth mentioning. Yeah, so look, Carolina. I mean, look, let me say this, man. Cam Newton was Lamar Jackson's the popular quarterback right now, doing all the things with his legs. Cam Newton was the original, right? Cam Newton's the OG. He's the guy that, broke the quarterback rushing record for rushing touchdowns for a quarterback. He's always been able to get out of trouble with his legs. The problem with Cam is just he has not been healthy. And then here's the other thing. Cam Newton is not an accurate passer. I would debate anybody in the world on this, and I'm putting that out there because Stephen A. Smith went on ESPN and made it like his argument to have for be the biggest Cam Newton defender in the world about his completion percentages and this and that. Look, when you got a running back like Christian McCaffrey and you could check the ball down and throw screen passes and throw R angle all day long, for those who don't know what R angle is, when you're talking about playing cover 2 and cover 3 teams, when you've got linebackers in a 4-2 defense that are going to sit and go hook to curl, the running back goes kind of check releases the flat and then runs an angle route to the middle of the field. Christian McCaffrey makes his money on that route. These are easy throws for a quarterback. He should make these throws. When you've got a guy like that who can give you some easy throws, you're going to have a high completion percentage, and you should. Cam Newton, though, is not accurate throwing the ball down the field. He's not accurate throwing dig routes. He's not accurate throwing post routes. He's not accurate throwing routes to wide receivers. Ron Rivera came out this week and said that his lack of accuracy could be due to the fact that he spent 10 days in a boot back in August. No, he's not an accurate passer. He's never been an accurate passer. He's not. Cam Newton has made a living with his legs. I'm not going to play Cam Newton this week for the simple fact that I want to see if the blueprint is out on how you defend Carolina. You look and see what Tampa Bay did week 1. They got blown up by the 49ers, and they came in and they pretty much shut down McCaffrey, and that pretty much shut down Cam Newton and frustrated him. So if there is a blueprint, the NFL is a copycat league. You'll see Arizona try to employ that same type of strategy. But you have to mention Christian McCaffrey is a guy to look at. You have to mention Greg Olsen as a guy to look at. I get it. Carolina, I don't have any interest in them, and that's not because I think Arizona is an outstanding defense. It is because I think Arizona has pieces. I think they're a really solid secondary, and if Tampa Bay has laid down a blueprint, that was picked up. Actually, if the Rams laid a blueprint down that was picked up and employed by Tampa Bay, who executed to perfection, Arizona will try to do the same exact thing, and that worries me just a little bit because like I said, if you're forcing Cam Newton to stay in the pocket and you're taking McCaffrey away by making it everybody in the world has that knows football knows that McCaffrey's made his money on the delayed R angle route between the two backers as a check down receiver. If everybody's figured that out, it's going to be tough for Cam Newton if they're going to make him actually throw the football.
Yeah, for sure. I'll agree. On the flip side with Arizona, I mean, you got Kyler Murray. The guy's actually not doing too bad. One thing that I like about him is he's thrown the ball at least 40 times in 2 straight games, so they're putting the ball in his hand. With the first game, he threw 54 times. It wasn't overtime. I will mention that. But I mean, like I said, he's not looking too bad. I mean, he's 3 rushing attempts a game. He hasn't had like a monster breakout game, and I could see him having a decent game here. Kyler Murray's in play as a GPP play. But I mean, there's 2 guys that I'm really interested in. I like the receivers. I mean, he's throwing to the receivers, and that's what's really standing out to me. You got Christian Kirk, 5,900. 20 targets in 2 games, averaging 10 targets a game, basically. The last game, he had a really good day against a good defense in Baltimore. 6 catches, 114 yards. And then you got the old man, bro. And I like this guy for cash games this week. I think that you can go right back to the well. 24 targets through 2 games for Larry Fitzgerald. Caught 5 for 104 yards, 13 fantasy points last week. Week 1, caught 8 for 113 and a touchdown. 5,900, just a really good price tag, especially for a guy who's averaging, 12 targets a game through 2 games. Outside of, Kyle Murray and the 2 wide receivers, I definitely think that you can look at David Johnson. He hurt his wrist a little bit. They said it was scary because a couple years ago he broke his wrist and he was out basically the whole entire season. He is good to go though. He said he's fine. 7,000. The workload wasn't there last week for him. 7 rushing attempts for 14 yards and a touchdown. 1 target, 1 catch for 0 yards. But week 1, he was the David Johnson that we've known for the past few years. 18 carries, 82 yards. Caught 6 of 7 passes for 55 yards and a touchdown. So I think that David Johnson is a guy that we can look at. 7,000 is a very good price tag on him. So I think he is in play. So for me, keep it simple. It's Kyler Murray. You can look at David Johnson, and you look at the 2 receivers, and Kirk and Fitzgerald, and you kind of just move on with Arizona.
Moving on.
Next game we're going to go with, you got the New York Giants going into Tampa Bay to face the Bucks.
So I'm going to tell you this right now. I'm going to give this away, okay? One of my top quarterbacks in the quarterback video this week will be Eli Manning. Call me crazy, okay? But look, everybody in New York this is the media capital of the world, right? And everybody and their mother is talking about, is it time to move on from Eli Manning? Is it time to move on from Eli Manning? Eli Manning's not the problem. He hasn't been the problem. 306 yards on 30 of 44 against Dallas in week 1, 26 of 45, 250 yards in week 2. Yes, he threw 2 picks against Buffalo, but like we just said, Buffalo has a legit defense. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers do not have a legit defense. They're not a legit defense. They're trying to be a good defense. They have Todd Bowles. Todd Bowles is very, very clever and very creative with blitz and pressures and coverages and all that stuff. I think Tampa Bay has the pieces to be a good defense as the season goes on, but I fully expect this game to be a fantasy fest. I just do. I think you can look at Eli Manning. I think you can look at Saquon Barkley. We talked about Evan Ingram. Everybody likes Evan Ingram. Evan Ingram from a fantasy production standpoint, 8 targets, 6 receptions, 48 yards. Not a monster week, but the targets were still there. You look at it again, and that's against a good Buffalo defense. Week 1, 14 targets, 11 catches, 116 yards, and a touchdown. I just think that this is a really good week, and I think that you're going to see some players come out and play for Eli Manning to take some pressure off of him. And then you got to talk about Saquon Barkley. $9,200. I think this is going to be a fantasy fest. 107 yards on 18 carries against a very difficult and very tough Buffalo defense. 7 targets, 3 receptions, 28 yards. Through 2 games, 13 targets and 7 receptions. We know last year he had some monster target games. I like the pieces for the New York Giants this week. I don't think anybody's going to own these pieces. I think people will look elsewhere. I think this is going to be fantasy fun in Tampa this weekend.
Yeah, for sure. So I mean, on the Tampa Bay side of things, I mean, I'll start with Jameis Winston, turnover machine, but he does have some upside going against the Giants defense that has just been absolutely getting torched. And Winston has some pieces. He has some really good weapons to throw to. He has a running back that's kind of emerging. So I think 7,300. I think that you can look at a Jameis Winston in a game that I think is probably going to be a high scoring, more of a shootout kind of game. Running back wise, Peyton Barber last week he got 23 carries for 82 yards and a rushing touchdown. One target for 7 yards. Peyton Barber, I want to kind of take a one more week approach on him. The only reason is the game flow kind of dictated for them to run the ball a little bit more. And I don't think that necessarily is going to be the same thing going against the Giants. One thing Chris Godwin, I mean, is he emerging as the number one receiver and Mike Evans is taking the back seat? I mean, that's what it's looking like through 2 games. I mean, 15 targets is not necessarily the ideal, but he has 11 catches for 174 yards, a touchdown each game. He's the guy the ball's getting thrown to in the red zone. So I really like Chris Godwin this week, 7,600. And then, on the flip side, I like Mike Evans. Mike Evans is still Mike Evans. He's still, a top 10, 15 receiver in the league. He's due for a breakout game. And we've seen this year after year from Mike Evans. He'll drought. All of a sudden, he'll have a 2-touchdown monster, 150 plus receiving type game. The targets, I mean, he has 13 targets through 2 games, averaging about 6.5, only 6 catches. I think that Mike Evans is a really good GPP play, because he's going to be low owned. He hasn't had, the monster game, and we know that Mike Evans could put up the monster game for sure. Tight end wise, OJ Howard, great. They're kind of splitting the snaps. I'm not really interested in them. I mean, in all honesty, on the Tampa Bay side of things, the 2 people I'm really, really interested in, I really like Chris Godwin. I really like Mike Evans. We know that Jameis Winston is going to throw the ball. And those are really the 2 guys that are standing out to me, more than anybody else for Tampa Bay. And that's really where I'm at.
I do like the Peyton Barber call. I think that you're right that last week against Carolina, the game flow kind of dictated that they run the football. And I think you could say the same thing about week 1 against San Francisco. Jameis Winston kept turning the football over, and the game flow didn't really dictate for them to run the football.
Right.
But he does have 5 targets through 2 games, and I think that it's a guy that can catch the ball out of the backfield. He will be involved in the screen game. And I don't want to knock the Bucs, man. I love Bruce Arians. I think Todd Bowles is a great defensive coordinator. You're talking about a guy who put his staff back together. And I think Tampa Bay is on the rise if they can get some things for Jameis Winston and make it a little bit more simple and help protect him. And if you're going to protect a quarterback, the best way to do it is with the running back. So I do like the Barber call at 6,100. The New York Giants are not a difficult, scary defense.
Yeah, for sure. Moving on, next game we're going to go with is going to be the Houston Texans going into LA to face the Chargers.
So Deshaun Watson wasn't a guy that I liked last week, and I thought that Jacksonville defense was going to show up. I mean, they're much improved. We'll see what happens now with Jalen Ramsey requesting a trade. We'll see if that situation cools off or if, in fact, they do trade him. But 16 of 29 was not very efficient, only 159 yards. And then the thing that he usually does, he didn't really do. They didn't let him. Jacksonville did a really good job of keeping him in the pocket. 4 rush attempts, 5 yards. He did have 1 touchdown. That kind of bailed his day out, was a rushing touchdown. Only 12.86 FanDuel points. You take the 6 points away from the rushing touchdown, it's a 6.86 point day. Not a real great day for Deshaun Watson. I do think Deshaun Watson will rebound this week. So I like him, and I do like the wide receivers, DeAndre Hopkins, Will Fuller. I think they've got good wide receivers around him. Kenny Stills, a big play type wide receiver, made a living in Miami making big plays down the field and bailing quarterbacks out. I think that as this thing goes, you're going to see them get more comfortable. They are going on the road. It's a warm environment. They're used to that. Los Angeles, not a loud place, not a raucous place. And the Chargers have been suspect through 2 games. Barely sneak out a win against the Indianapolis Colts. And then, look, I fully thought the Chargers would go in and just blow the doors off Detroit. They're a little bit suspect. Their defense, they're all over the place in week one, giving up a ton of rushing yards to Marlon Mack. Jacoby Brissett threw touchdown passes on them. And then they tighten up. They have a really good week in Detroit. So there's a little bit of Jekyll and Hyde there. I'm not sure about that defense. I think that there's enough weapons on Houston where they can go in and put up some points here against the Chargers.
Yeah, I mean, the Chargers are simple. I mean, you got Phillip Rivers is Phillip Rivers. I mean, you can use him in GPP basically any week because he does have those 4 touchdown games where he throws. 7,500 is not necessarily the best price tag. GPP for me, I'll keep it simple right there with Phillip Rivers. The two main guys I'm going to focus on the Charger side of things. Austin Eckler, he's looking like the guy they're going to play, and he's going to be a 3-down back for the most part. 17 carries, 66 yards, and a touchdown. He also had a touchdown. He broke like a 20-yard run. It was a holding call, got called back, took a touchdown away from him there. Plus, he has 13 targets through 2 games, caught 12 of 13 targets. I mean, he's doing it in every way. He's getting the targets. He's getting the rushing attempts for the most part, 7,600. If he's going to continue to get this kind of work, I think it's a very good price tag for him. 20 and 36 fantasy points through 2 games. I like him. And, going into week one, we talked about Eckler. And even last week, we talked about him like, okay, well, he had a good day. And we got to kind of see it again. And the fact that, he got another 6 targets. He got even more rushing attempts this game. I like Eckler at 7,600. I think he's a really, really good play. And then the other guy is, you already know who it is. Keenan Allen, Mr. Steady. He's going to get double-digit targets every single week. Had 15 targets last week. Caught 8 of them for 98 yards. Week 1, 10 targets. Caught 8 of them for 123 yards. It's the same story with the Chargers. Phillip Rivers is going to throw the ball to Keenan Allen, and it's looking like Eckler has really stepped into that Melvin Gordon kind of role where he's, a 3-down back. And I mean, that's really where it is with the Chargers. Just keep it simple, keep it easy, and let's move on. So next game we're going to go with is going to be the New Orleans Saints without Drew Brees going into Seattle to face the Seahawks.
Without Drew Brees, right? I mean, welcome Teddy Bridgewater. This will be the Teddy Bridgewater show. The thing about it is Teddy Bridgewater actually looked pretty good. And the other thing about it is he was 17 of 30. So the completion percentage, not great. We know he can escape pressure. He can be creative. He can use his legs. But he's got weapons, man. He's got Michael Thomas. He's got Alvin Kamara. He's got weapons around him. He's there for a reason. He's there because Sean Payton liked the guy, and Sean Payton thought that in getting Teddy Bridgewater, if anything did happen to Drew Brees, this guy could take over and do the job. He thought Teddy Bridgewater would be a guy that could be around when Drew Brees hangs it up. So Sean Payton likes the guy. They didn't game plan, obviously, for Teddy Bridgewater to be in the game. They will put a game plan together for Teddy Bridgewater this week. I like Teddy Bridgewater at 6,800, man. I really do, and I like the weapons around him. I do like Alvin Kamara. I do like Michael Thomas. Jared Cook, I liked him before the season started. I think that I've said it over and over and over again. When you've got a quarterback or a quarterback situation that you're not confident in, the best friend to him is a good running game. You've got Kamara, and then using your tight end in the short to intermediate passing game. And they've got a good tight end in Jared Cook. By the way, a good number 1 wide receiver in Michael Thomas. So I like all 4 of those pieces this week against Seattle, man. I like them all.
Yeah, so we'll look on the Seattle side of things. I think that you start with the Seattle's defense. I mean, even though Bridgewater did look pretty good, you got a backup quarterback coming into the Seattle stadium. We know that the crowd is always ruckus. It's a tough environment.
I got to call the T, bro.
Talk to me.
They played a backup quarterback last week and had 3 fantasy points.
Yeah,
they gave up 26 points.
That's true. I get you for sure.
And if I gave you the choice, right, between who do you want to start a football game for you? You want Teddy Bridgewater or you want Mason Rudolph? Who do you want? I'm sure you're taking Teddy Bridgewater.
Yeah, no, you're right. I agree with you. I definitely agree. I mean, it's
I
tough.
get the play though, bro. I mean, I do get the play.
Yeah, for sure. It's just like, yeah, no, I mean, it's like going against the backup quarterback, anything can happen. Same thing is, we like to play, defenses against rookies because rookies kind of have the blow up kind of game. But yeah, no, so I mean, it definitely is a GPP play. Obviously, I'm going to do everything I can to get the Cowboys defense for my cash games. I mean, it's pretty simple. Cowboys defense or the Patriots defense for cash games, I think is the way to go. But outside of the Saints defense for GPP, we'll make that very clear. I think you can look at Russell Wilson, threw for 300 yards last week. If Bridgewater could get it going, this game they could put up some points on both sides, and he'll have to throw the ball. We know what Russell Wilson gives us on the ground as well. So I think he's a GPP play you can look at. Chris Carson, 7,000. 15 carries each game. Last game he didn't necessarily have the best game. I mean, 15 carries, 60 yards, lost a fumble, but he had 3 targets, caught all 3 of them for 27 yards. So they're using him, both in the passing game and the run game. Week 1 he had 7 targets, caught 6 of them for 34 yards and a touchdown. So 7,000 for a guy who's going to be a workhorse back and be, out there for the most part on 3 downs. I think that you could look at him probably a little bit more GPP play just because, I mean, he's a little bit inconsistent. I would kind of say a little bit as far as, sometimes, 15 carries, he'll get 100 yards. Sometimes 15 carries, he'll get 60 yards compared to Zeke. Whenever, you got Zeke and you're going to give Zeke 20 carries, he's going to get you right around 100 yards, consistently get you that. I think Chris Carson is a good GPP play. And then, GPP as well. I think, all these guys in Seattle are more GPP plays. I'll be honest with you. Tyler Lockett, he's usually the big play guy, 6,600. Week 1, he only had 2 targets, caught one of them for 44 yards and a touchdown. The big play, like we mentioned. Last week, he had 12 targets. I mean, it's a drastic difference. 10 more targets between the 2 weeks. Caught 10 of them for 79 yards. They used him more as kind of the possession guy. But either way, he got you 11 fantasy points week 1. He got you 13 last week. So he is in play. DJ Metcalf, this guy, I mean, I don't know. We talked about, I don't even know how this guy goes up and catches the ball. His arm is too big. He looks like he's too stiff. But, hey, man, 6 and 7 targets. He's looking like the guy they're going to go to in the red zone. Throw the ball up, let the big dude go up and get it. 6,200 GPP play. If he can find his way in the end zone, I definitely could kind of pay off that price tag. That's really where I'm at with Seattle. I mean, I like a couple of the guys that I mentioned, but they're not my favorite plays on the slate. It's kind of where I'm at.
And just as you say, Metcalf looks like he's the red zone guy. Will Disley, 5 targets, 5 receptions, 2 touchdowns. I mean, the thing with Seattle is you just don't know who they're going to involve in their offense. It's a little bit like New England from a certain standpoint. I mean, look, you talked about Chris Carson, and I would say at minimum, Chris Carson's been disappointing this season based on the production and the forecasts and all of the hype that was around him, and where a lot of people recommended drafting him in year-long leagues. Rashad Penny has gotten love in these first 2 games, and he's taken action away. And then, as if Rashad Penny and Chris Carson splitting carries wasn't enough, you bring in CJ Prosise. And this dude was legit in college, and it looks like they clearly want to involve him in the passing game. Only 3 targets, but he did have 3 receptions. So you adding a third guy to this running back rotation, and then watch. Chris Carson will go off for 2 touchdowns, and
right.
nobody will know.
I mean, I'm going to have him in a little bit of GPP for sure. I just don't like the consistency for cash games. Kind of where I was at with him. Final game of the slate that we're going to talk about. You got Pittsburgh with the new backup quarterback you just mentioned going into San Francisco, who's 2-0, and they're actually looking pretty good through the first couple of weeks.
Maybe Pittsburgh knows something that nobody else knows, but when you trade away your first-round pick and your franchise quarterback has gone on the IR with an elbow injury and is gone for the foreseeable future, you must really believe in Mason Rudolph. You must really believe in him. So 12 of 19, 112 yards. He threw 2 touchdowns. He does have some weapons around him. We'll have to see what happens with James Conner. But Jalen Samuels last year, when he spot started for Conner, he went out against the Patriots, had 19 carries for 142 yards. We know Jalen Samuels is perfectly capable. I don't like the fact that FanDuel seems to have already priced in Jalen Samuels as going to start this week at 6,100. Still a good deal. Still a good deal. And then obviously you look at the receiving targets in Juju Smith-Schuster, James Washington, and Dante Moncrief. I think Dante Moncrief is going to have a monster week, and he's going to win somebody a ton of money at some point this year. I don't know if this is the game. You do look and see Chris Godwin. You do look and see, both of the receivers from Cincinnati last year had pretty decent days receiving the football. And even though it was garbage time, I do think that if this game does get out of hand, in the 49ers' favor, being it's their home opener, it's a backup quarterback. We don't know what's going to happen with Connor. I think these guys play because this is your quarterback for the rest of the year. And if you're going to make the playoffs, it's going to be with Mason Rudolph. So I think these guys play. And I think that if they do play and this game does get out of hand, then I think in the second half, you'll see garbage time fantasy production. So I think that they're very relevant. You get afternoon kickers in these guys. And then look, Vance McDonald was a little bit of a narrative play here. This is where he started. They traded Vance McDonald to the Pittsburgh Steelers, the 49ers, that is. He's had 11 targets through 2 games. He's had 9 receptions, 2 receiving touchdowns. Vance McDonald's a very good tight end. They got rid of him because they didn't know. I mean, they knew they had George Kittle. Nobody else knew that. But I do like some of the Pittsburgh's options here. I like the receiving options. If Connor doesn't go, I think you can look at Jalen Samuels at $6,100. The 49ers have been a very tough defense, but like I said, I think that these guys are going to play in this game no matter what the outcome is because they've got to get game reps for Rudolph, and they're not going to give him game reps with 2s. They're going to give him game reps with 1s because these are guys going to play with for the rest of the year.
Yeah, for sure. On the San Francisco side of things, I'll throw out there their defense. Same thing with the Bridgewater thing. Their defense going against a backup quarterback. I think they're playing. The 49ers defense has actually looked really good to start the season as well. So I'll throw them out there. Then we'll start, Garoppolo. Garoppolo had a really good week last week, 7,200, threw for 3 touchdowns and interception, ran the ball a couple of times for 24 fantasy points. I think he's a GPP player that you can look at. I'm going to come to the running backs for the San Francisco. I played Matt Breida in cash, and we got away with it. He ended up breaking a couple, and he got us 14 fantasy points at a sub 6,000 price tag. But I'm scared of this situation for the San Francisco running backs. They had 3 guys that carried the ball at least 10 times last week. So it's a big time timeshare. And of those 3 guys that got at least 10 carries, is not even the initial starter in Tevin Coleman, who's hurt right now. So they got a bunch of really, really good running backs right now, and they're kind of really spreading the love. Going to the wide receivers, Deebo Samuels, he had a pretty good game. 7 targets, caught 5 of them for 87 yards and a touchdown. At the end of the day, when it's all said and done, I think Marquise Goodwin is going to be the guy for them. He's going to be their best receiver. But I think that the thing about the 49ers that I personally think is they need like a true number 1 receiver. I feel like Goodwin, I feel like the guy Deebo are both more like secondary receivers. This week, I think that George Kittle is going to have a pretty good week. Last week, he kind of had a down week. He only got 3 targets, caught 3 of them for 54 yards. Week 1, he had 10 targets, caught 8 of them. So I think he's due for a breakout week. I think it could be this week for George Kittle. Obviously, Garoppolo is going to be like, look, bro, I know you're my best receiver at the end of the day. George, I'm going to get you some more targets. My bad. Let's kind of move on. I like George Kittle, 6,600. I think it's a very good price tag on him. And that's really where I'm at. For the 49ers, my favorite play is going to be George Kittle at 6,600.
I could not disagree with you anymore on the 49ers for one simple fact. You're 100% right with they need a true number 1 wide receiver. But they believe it's Deebo Samuel. They've said they believe it's Deebo Samuel. They haven't said we believe Deebo Samuel is our number 1 wide receiver. They've said we have a number 1 wide receiver on our roster. We believe we have a number 1 wide receiver on our roster. They're showing you that they believe Deebo Samuel is their number 1 wide receiver. I don't think Marquise Goodwin can be a number 1 wide receiver, and I don't look at it the same way that you do with the Kittle situation. You cannot you cannot target your tight end that many times over the middle of the field and just keep going to him and going to him and going to him. Gronkowski just came out and said that he thinks he had 20 concussions by playing in the NFL. Kittle is the best tight end in football, in my opinion, and you can't just beat this guy up. They've got to have a real offense. Deebo Samuel, to me, I think they're going to continue to showcase this guy throughout the season. I think he's going to have a breakout year. I think he's their number one wide receiver.
Yeah, hey, we're going to have to wait and see for sure. Time will tell. It's a young season. So, I mean, that's, I think, basically where we're at for week 3, kind of get you an early look and kind of give you our idea, game by game breakdown. If you haven't already, make sure to check out the site, dfscheatsheet.com. And hey, good luck this week. All right, guys? Peace out.